The Mahabharata Adi Parva. Section CXXX. Sambhava Parva continued. Janamejaya said, O Brahmana, it behoveth thee to relate to me everything about the birth of Kripa. How did he spring from a clump of heath? Whence also did he obtain his weapons? Vaisampayana said, O king, the great sage Gautama had a son named Saradwat. This Saradwat was born with arrows in hand. O oppressor of foes, the son of Gautama exhibited great aptitude for the study of the science of weapons, but none for the other sciences. Saradwat acquired all his weapons by those austerities by which Brahmanas in student life acquire the knowledge of Vedas. Gautama, the son of Gautama, by his aptitude for the science of weapons and by his austerities made Indra himself greatly afraid of him. Then, O thou of Kuru's race, the chief of the gods summoned a celestial damsel named Janapati and sent her unto Gautama, saying, Do thy best to disturb the austerities of Gautama. Repairing unto the charming asylum of Saradwat, the damsel began to tempt the ascetic equipped with bow and arrows. Beholding that Apsara, of figure unrivaled on earth for beauty, alone in those woods and clad in a single piece of cloth, Saradwat's eyes expanded with delight. At the sight of the damsel, his bow and arrows slipped from his hand and his frame shook all over with emotion, but possessed of ascetic fortitude and strength of soul, the sage mustered sufficient patience to bear up against the temptation. The suddenness, however, of his mental agitation caused an unconscious emission of his vital fluid. Leaving his bow and arrows and deerskin behind, he went away, flying from the Apsara. His vital fluid, however, having fallen upon a clump of heath, was divided into two parts, whence sprang two children that were twins. And it happened that a soldier in attendance upon King Santanu while the monarch was out hunting in the woods, came upon the twins. And seeing the bow and arrows and deerskin on the ground, he thought they might be the offspring of some Brahmana proficient in the science of arms. Deciding thus, he took up the children along with the bow and arrows, and showed what he had to the king. Beholding them, the king was moved with pity, and saying, Let these become my children, brought them to his palace. Then that first of men, Santanu, the son of Pratipha, having brought Gautama's twins into his house, performed in respect of them the usual rites of religion. And he began to bring them up and called them Kripa and Kripi, in allusion to the fact that he brought them up from motives of pity. Kripa, the son of Gautama, having left his former asylum, continued his study of the science of arms in right earnest. By his spiritual insight he learnt that his son and daughter were in the palace of Santanu. He thereupon went to the monarch and represented everything about his lineage. He then taught Kripa the 4 branches of the science of arms, and various other branches of knowledge, including all their mysteries and recondite details. In a short time Kripa became an eminent professor of the science of arms. And the 100 sons of Dhritarashtra, and the Pandavas along with the Yadvas, and the Vrishnas, and many other princes from various lands, began to receive lessons from him in that science. Section 30. Sambhava Parva continued. Vaisampayana said, desirous of giving his grandsons a superior education, Bhishma was on the lookout for a teacher endued with energy and well skilled in the science of arms. Deciding, O chief of the Bharatas, that none who was not possessed of great intelligence, none who was not illustrious or a perfect master of the science of arms, none who was not of godlike might, should be the instructor of the Kuru princes. The son of Ganga, O tiger among men, placed the Pandavas and the Kauravas under the tuition of Bharadvaja's son, the intelligent Drona skilled in all the Vedas. Pleased with the reception given him by the great Bhishma, that foremost of all men skilled in arms, viz., illustrious Drona of worldwide fame, accepted the princes as his pupils. And Drona taught them the science of arms in all its branches. And, O monarch, both the Kauravas and the Pandavas endued with immeasurable strength, in a short time became proficient in the use of all kinds of arms. Janamejaya asked, O Brahmana, how was Drona born? How and whence did he acquire his arms? How and why came he unto the Kurus, whose son also was he endued with such energy? Again, how was his son Aswathaman, the foremost of all skilled in arms, born? I wish to hear all this. Please recite them in detail. Vaisampayana said, there dwelt at the source of the Ganga, a great sage, named Bharadvaja, ceaselessly observing the most rigid vows. One day, of old, intending to celebrate the Agnihotra sacrifice, he went along with many great rishis to the Ganga to perform his ablutions. Arrived at the bank of the stream, he saw Gritaki herself, that Apsara endued with youth and beauty, who had gone there a little before. With an expression of pride in her countenance, mixed with a voluptuous languor of attitude, the damsel rose from the water after her ablutions were over. And as she was gently treading on the bank, her attire, which was loose, became disordered. Seeing her attire disordered, the sage was smitten with burning desire. The next moment his vital fluid came out, in consequence of the violence of his emotion. The rishi immediately held it in a vessel called a drona. Then, O king, Drona sprang from the fluid thus preserved in that vessel by the wise Bharadvaja. And the child thus born studied all the Vedas and their branches. Before now Bharadvaja of great prowess, and the foremost of those possessing a knowledge of arms, had communicated to the illustrious Agni-Vesa, a knowledge of the weapon called Agneya. O foremost one of Bharata's race, the Rishi, Agni-Vesa, sprung from fire, now communicated the knowledge of that great weapon to Drona, the son of his preceptor. There was a king named Prihata who was a great friend of Bharadvaja. About this time Prihata had a son born unto him, named Drupada. And that bull among Kshatriyas, viz., Drupada, the son of Prihata, used every day to come to the hermitage of Bharadvaja to play with Drona and study in his company. O monarch, when Prihata was dead, this Drupada of mighty arms became the king of the northern Panchalas. About this time the illustrious Bharadvaja also ascended to heaven. Drona, continuing to reside in his father's hermitage, devoted himself to ascetic austerities. Having become well versed in the Vedas and their branches, and having burnt also all his sins by asceticism, the celebrated Drona, obedient to the injunctions of his father and moved by the desire of offspring, married Kripi, the daughter of Saradwat. And this woman, ever engaged in virtuous acts and the Agnihotra, and the austerest of penances, obtained a son named Aswathaman. And as soon as Aswathaman was born, he neighed like the celestial steed Akasravas. Hearing that cry, an invisible being in the skies said, the voice of this child hath, like the neighing of a horse, been audible all around. The child shall, therefore, be known by the name of Aswathaman, the horse-voiced. The son of Bharadvaja, Drona, was exceedingly glad at having obtained that child. Continuing to reside in that hermitage, he devoted himself to the study of the science of arms. O king, it was about this time that Drona heard that the illustrious Brahmana Jamadagna, that slayer of foes, that foremost one among all wielders of weapons, versed in all kinds of knowledge, had expressed a desire of giving away all his wealth to Brahmanas. Having heard of Rama's knowledge of arms and of his celestial weapons also, Drona set his heart upon them as also upon the knowledge of morality that Rama possessed. Then Drona of mighty arms, endued with high ascetic virtues, accompanied by disciples who were all devoted to vows ascetic austerities, set out for the Mahendra mountains. Arrived at Mahendra, the son of Bharadvaja, possessed of high ascetic merit, beheld the son of Bhrigu, the exterminator of all foes, endued with great patience and with mind under complete control. Then, approaching with his disciples that scion of the Bhrigu race Drona, giving him his name, told him of his birth in the line of Angaras. And touching the ground with his head, he worshipped Rama's feet. And beholding the illustrious son of Jamadagni intent upon retiring into the woods after having given away all his wealth, Drona said, "No. Me to have sprung from Bharadvaja, but not in any woman's womb. I am a Brahmana of high birth, Drona by name, come to thee with the desire of obtaining thy wealth." On hearing him, that illustrious grinder of the Kshatriya race replied, "Thou art welcome, O best of regenerate ones. Tell me what thou desirest." Thus addressed by Rama, the son of Bharadvaja replied unto that foremost of all smiters, desirous of giving away the whole of his wealth, "O thou of multifarious vows, I am a candidate for thy eternal wealth, O thou of ascetic wealth," returned Rama, "my gold and whatever other wealth I had, have all been given away unto Brahmanas. This earth also, to the verge of the sea, decked with towns and cities, as with a garland of flowers, I have given unto Kashyapa. I have now my body only and my various valuable weapons left. I am prepared to give either my body or my weapons. Say, which thou wouldst have? I would give it thee. Say quickly." Drona answered, "O son of Bhrigu, it behoveth thee to give me all thy weapons together with the mysteries of hurling and recalling them." Saying, "So be it," the son of Bhrigu gave all his weapons unto Drona. Indeed, the whole science of arms with its rules and mysteries. Accepting them all, and thinking himself amply rewarded, that best of Brahmanas then, glad at heart, set out for the city of his friend Drupada. Section 30. Sambhava Parva continued. Vaisampayana said, "Then, O king, the mighty son of Bharadvaja presented himself before Drupada, and addressing that monarch, said, 'Know me for thy friend.' Thus addressed by his friend, the son of Bharadvaja, with a joyous heart, the lord of the Panchalas was ill able to bear that speech. The king, intoxicated with the pride of wealth, contracted his brows in wrath, and with reddened eyes spake these words unto Drona, "O Brahmana! Thy intelligence is scarcely of a high order, inasmuch as thou sayest unto me, all on a sudden, that thou art my friend. O thou of dull apprehension, great kings can never be friends with such luckless and indigent wights as thou. It is true there had been friendship between thee and me before, for we were then both equally circumstanced. But time, that impereth everything in its course, impereth friendship also. In this world, friendship never endureth for ever in any heart. Time weareth it off, and anger destroyeth it too. Do not stick, therefore, to that worn off friendship. Think not of it any longer. The friendship I had with thee, O first of Brahmanas, was for a particular purpose. Friendship can never subsist between a poor man and a rich man, between a man of letters and an unlettered mind, between a hero and a coward. Why dost thou desire the continuance of our former friendship? There may be friendship or hostility between persons equally situated as to wealth or might. The indigent and the affluent can neither be friends nor quarrel with each other. One of impure birth can never be a friend to one of pure birth. One who is not a car warrior can never be a friend to one who is so, and one who is not a king never have a king for his friend. Therefore, why dost thou desire the continuance of our former friendship? Vaisampayana continued, thus addressed by Drupada, the mighty son of Bharadvaja became filled with wrath, and reflecting for a moment, made up his mind as to his course of action. Seeing the insolence of the Panchala king, he wished to check it effectually. Hastily leaving the Panchala capital, Drona bent his steps towards the capital of the Kurus, named after the elephant. Section 30th. Sambhava Parva continued. Vaisampayana said, arrived at Hastinapura, that best of Brahmanas, the son of Bharadvaja, continued to live privately in the house of Gautama. Kripa, his mighty son, Aswathaman, at intervals of Kripa's teaching, used to give the sons of Kunti lessons in the use of arms. But as yet, none knew of Aswathaman's prowess. Drona had thus lived privately for some time in the house of Kripa when one day the heroic princes, all in a company, came out of Hastinapura. And coming out of the city, they began to play with the ball and roam about in gladness of heart. And it so happened that the ball with which they had been playing fell into a well. And thereupon the princes strove their best to recover it from the well. But all the efforts the princes made to recover it proved futile. They then began to eye one another bashfully. And not knowing how to recover it, their anxiety became great. Just at this time they beheld a Brahmana near enough unto them, of darkish hue, decrepit and lean, sanctified by the performance of the Agnihotra, and who had finished his daily rites of worship. And beholding that illustrious Brahmana, the princes who had despaired of success surrounded him immediately. Drona, for that Brahmana was no other, seeing the princes unsuccessful, and conscious of his own skill, smiled a little, and addressing them said, shame on your Kshatriya might, and shame also on your skill in arms. You have been born in the race of Bharata. How is it that ye cannot recover the ball from the bottom of this well? If yet promise me a dinner today, I will, with these blades of grass, bring up not only the ball ye have lost but this ring also that I now throw down. Thus saying, Drona, that oppressor of foes, taking off his ring, threw it down into the dry well. Then Yudhishthira, the son of Kunti, addressing Drona, said, O Brahmana, thou askest for a trifle. Do thou, with Kripa's permission, obtain of us that which would last thee for life. Thus addressed, Drona with smiles replied unto the Bharata princes, saying, this handful of long grass I would invest, by my mantras, with the virtue of weapons. Behold, these blades possess virtues that other weapons have not. I will, with one of these blades, pierce the ball, and then pierce that blade with another, and that another with a third, and thus shall I, by a chain, bring up the ball. Vaisampayana continued, then Drona did exactly what he had said. And the princes were all amazed and their eyes expanded with delight. And regarding what they had witnessed to be very extraordinary, they said, O learned Brahmana, do thou bring up the ring also without loss of time. Then the illustrious Drona, taking a bow with an arrow, pierced the ring with that arrow and brought it up at once. And taking the ring thus brought up from the well still pierced with his arrow, he coolly gave it to the astonished princes. Then the latter, seeing the ring thus recovered, said, we bow to thee, O Brahmana. None else owneth such. Skill. We long to know who thou art and whose son. What also can we do for thee? Thus addressed, Drona replied unto the princes, saying, Do ye repair unto Bhishma and describe to him my likeness and skill. The mighty one will recognize me. The princes then saying, So be it, repaired unto Bhishma and telling him of the purport of that Brahmana's speech, related everything about his extraordinary feat. Hearing everything from the princes, Bhishma at once understood that the Brahmana was none else than Drona, and thinking that he would make the best preceptor for the princes, went in person unto him and welcoming him respectfully, brought him over to the place. Then Bhishma, that foremost of all wielders of arms, adroitly asked him the cause of his arrival at Hastinapura. Asked by him, Drona represented everything as it had happened, saying, O sir, in times past I went to the great Rishi Agni-Vesa for obtaining from him his weapons, desirous also of learning the science of arms. Devoted to the service of my preceptor, I lived with him for many years in the humble guise of a brahmacharan, with matted locks on my head. At that time, actuated by the same motives, the prince of Punchala, the mighty Yajanasena, also lived in the same asylum. He became my friend, always seeking my welfare. I liked him much. Indeed, we lived together for many years. O thou of Kuru's race, from our earliest years we had studied together and, indeed, he was my friend from boyhood, always speaking and doing what was agreeable to me. For gratifying me, O Bhishma, he used to tell me, O Drona, I am the favorite child of my illustrious father. When the king installeth me as monarch of the Panchalas, the kingdom shall be thine. O friend, this, indeed, is my solemn promise. My dominion, wealth, and happiness, shall all be dependent on thee. At last, the time came for his departure. Having finished his studies, he bent his steps towards his country. I offered him my regards at the time, and, indeed, I remembered his words ever afterwards. Some time after, in obedience to the injunctions of my father and tempted also by the desire of offspring, I married Kripi of short hair, who gifted with great intelligence, had observed many rigid vows, and was ever engaged in the Agnihotra and other sacrifices and rigid austerities. Gautami, in time, gave birth to a son named Aswathaman of great prowess, and equal in splendor unto the sun himself. Indeed, I was pleased on having obtained Aswathaman as much as my father had been on obtaining me. And it so happened that one day the child Aswathaman, observing some rich men's sons drink milk, began to cry. At this I was so beside myself that I lost all knowledge of the point of the compass. Instead of asking him who had only a few kine, so that if he gave me one, he would no longer be able to perform his sacrifices and thus sustain a loss of virtue, I was desirous of obtaining a cow from one who had many, and for that I wandered from country to country. But my wanderings proved unsuccessful, for I failed to obtain a milch cow. After I had come back unsuccessful, some of my son's playmates gave him water mixed with powdered rice. Drinking this, the poor boy was deceived into the belief that he had taken milk, and began to dance in joy, saying, Oh, I have taken milk. I have taken milk. Beholding him dance with joy amid these playmates smiling at his simplicity, I was exceedingly touched. Hearing also the derisive speeches of busybodies who said, Fie upon the indigent Drona, who strives not to earn wealth, whose son drinking water mixed with powdered rice mistaketh for milk and danceth with joy, saying, I have taken milk. I have taken milk. I was quite beside myself. Reproaching myself much, I at last resolved that even if I should have to live cast off and censured by Brahmanas, I would not yet, from desire of wealth, be anybody's servant, which is ever hateful. Thus resolved, O Bhishma, I went, for former friendship, unto the king of the Somakas, taking with me my dear child and wife. Hearing that he had been installed in the sovereignty of the Somakas, I regarded myself as blessed beyond compare. Joyfully I went unto that dear friend of mine, seated on the throne, remembering my former friendship with him and also his own words to me. And, O illustrious one, approaching Drupada, I said, O tiger among men, know me for thy friend. Saying this, I approached him confidently as a friend should. But Drupada, laughing in derision, cast me off as if I were a vulgar fellow. Addressing me he said, Thy intelligence scarcely seemeth to be of a high order, inasmuch as, approaching me suddenly, thou sayest thou art my friend. Time that impereth everything, impereth friendship also. My former friendship with thee was for a particular purpose. One of impure birth can never be a friend of one who is of pure birth. One who is not a car warrior can never be a friend of one who is such. Friendship can only subsist between persons that are of equal rank, but not between those that are unequally situated. Friendship never subsisteth forever in my heart. Time impereth friendships, as also anger destroyeth them. Do thou not stick, therefore, to that worn off friendship between us. Think not of it any longer. The friendship I had with thee, O best of Brahmanas, was for a special purpose. There cannot be friendship between a poor man and a rich man, between an unlettered hind and a man of letters, between a coward and a hero. Why dost thou, therefore, desire the revival of our former friendship? O thou of simple understanding, great kings can never have friendship with such indigent and luckless wight as thou. One who is not a king can never have a king for his friend. I do not remember ever having promised thee my kingdom. But, O Brahmana, I can now give thee food and shelter for one night. Thus addressed by him, I left his presence quickly with my wife, vowing to do that which I will certainly do soon enough. Thus insulted by Drupada, O Bhishma, I have been filled with wrath. I have come to the Kurus, desirous of obtaining intelligent and docile pupils. I come to Hastinapura to gratify thy wishes. Oh, tell me what I am to do. Vaisampayana continued, thus addressed by the son of Bharadvaja. Bhishma said unto him, String thy bow, O Brahmana, and make the Kuru princes accomplished in arms, worshipped by the Kurus, enjoy with a glad heart to thy fill every comfort in their abode. Thou art the absolute Lord, O Brahmana, of whatever wealth the Kurus have and of their sovereignty and kingdom. The Kurus are thine, from this day. Think that, as already accomplished which may be in thy heart. Thou art, O Brahmana, obtained by us as the fruit of our great good luck. Indeed, the favor thou hast conferred upon me by thy arrival is great. Section 30. Sambhava Parva continued. Vaisampayana said, thus worshipped by Bhishma, Drona, that first of men, endued with great energy, took up his quarters in the abode of the Kurus and continued to live there, receiving their adorations. After he had rested a while, Bhishma, taking with him his grandsons, the Kaurava princes, gave them unto him as pupils, making at the same time many valuable presents. And the mighty one, Bhishma, also joyfully gave unto the son of Bharadvaja, a house that was tidy and neat and well filled with paddy and every kind of wealth. And that first of archers, Drona, thereupon joyfully accepted the Kauravas, viz., the sons of Pandu and Dhritarashtra, as his pupils. And having accepted them all as his pupils, one day Drona called them apart and making them touch his feet, said to them with a swelling heart, I have in my heart a particular purpose. Promise me truly, ye sinless ones, that when ye have become skilled in arms, ye will accomplish it. Vaisampayana continued, hearing these words, the Kuru princes remained silent. But Arjuna, O king, vowed to accomplish it whatever it was. Drona then cheerfully clasped Arjuna to his bosom and took the scent of his head repeatedly, shedding tears of joy all the while. Then Drona endued with great prowess taught the sons of Pandu, the use of many weapons, both celestial and human. And, O bull of the Bharata race, many other princes also flocked to that best of Brahmanas for instruction in arms. The Vrishnas and the Andhakas, and princes from various lands, and the adopted son of Radha of the Sudha caste, Karna, all became pupils of Drona. But of them all, the Sudha child Karna, from jealousy, frequently defied Arjuna, and supported by Duryodhana, used to disregard the Pandavas. Arjuna, however, from devotion to the science of arms, always stayed by the side of his preceptor, and in skill, strength of arms, and perseverance, excelled all his class fellows. Indeed, although the instruction the preceptor gave was the same in the case of all, yet in lightness and skill Arjuna became the foremost of all his fellow pupils. And Drona was convinced that none of his pupils would, at any time, be able to be equal to that son of Indra. Thus Drona continued giving lessons to the princes in the science of weapons. And while he gave unto every one of his pupils a narrow-mouthed vessel, for fetching water, in order that much time may be spent in filling them, he gave unto his own son Aswathaman a broad-mouthed vessel, so that, filling it quickly, he might return soon enough. And in the intervals so gained, Drona used to instruct his own son in several superior methods of using weapons. Jishnu, Arjuna, came to know of this, and thereupon filling his narrow-mouthed vessel with water by means of the Varuna weapon he used to come unto his preceptor at the same time with his preceptor's son. And accordingly the intelligent son of Parita, that foremost of all men possessing a knowledge of weapons, had no inferiority to his preceptor's son in respect of excellence. Arjuna's devotion to the service of his preceptor as also to arms was very great. And he soon became the favorite of his preceptor. And Drona, beholding his pupil's devotion to arms, summoned the cook, and told him in secret, never give Arjuna his food in the dark, nor tell him that I have told thee this. A few days after, however, when Arjuna was taking his food, a wind arose, and thereupon the lamp that had been burning went out. But Arjuna, endued with energy, continued eating in the dark, his hand, from habit, going to his mouth. His attention being thus called to the force of habit, the strong-armed son of Pandu set his heart upon practicing with his bow in the night. And, O Bharata, Drona, hearing the twang of his bowstring in the night, came to him, and clasping him, said, truly, do I tell thee that I shall do that unto thee by which there shall not be an archer equal to thee in this world. Vaisampayana continued, thereafter Drona began to teach Arjuna the art of fighting on horseback, on the back of elephants, on car, and on the ground. And the mighty Drona also instructed Arjuna in fighting with the mace, the sword, the lance, the spear, and the dart. And he also instructed him in using many weapons and fighting with many men at the same time. And hearing reports of his skill, kings and princes, desirous of learning the science of arms, flocked to Drona by thousands. Amongst those that came there, O monarch, was a prince named Eklavya, who was the son of Hiraniadonis, king of the Nishidas, the lowest of the mixed orders. Drona, however, cognizant of all rules of morality, accepted not the prince as his pupil in archery, seeing that he was a Nishada who might, in time, excel all his high-born pupils. But, O oppressor of all enemies, the Nishada prince, touching Drona's feet with bent head, wended his way into the forest, and there he made a clay image of Drona, and began to worship it respectfully, as if it was his real preceptor, and practiced weapons before it with the most rigid regularity. In consequence of his exceptional reverence for his preceptor and his devotion to his purpose, all the three processes of fixing arrows on the bowstring, aiming, and letting off became very easy for him. And one day, O grinder of foes, the Kuru and the Pandava princes, with Drona's leave, set out in their cars on a hunting excursion. A servant, O king, followed the party at leisure, with the usual implements and a dog. Having come to the woods, they wandered about, intent on the purpose they had in view. Meanwhile, the dog also, in wandering alone in the woods, came upon the Nishada prince, Eklavya. And beholding the Nishada of dark hue, of body besmeared with filth, dressed in black and bearing matted locks on head, the dog began to bark aloud. Thereupon the Nishada prince, desirous of exhibiting his lightness of hand, sent 7 arrows into its mouth, before it could shut it. The dog, thus pierced with 7 arrows, came back to the Pandavas. Those heroes, who beheld that sight, were filled with wonder, and, ashamed of their own skill, began to praise the lightness of hand and precision of aim by auricular precision, exhibited by the unknown archer. And they thereupon began to seek in those woods for the unknown dweller therein, that had shown such skill. And, O king, the Pandavas soon found out the object of their search, ceaselessly discharging arrows from the bow. And, beholding that man of grim visage, who was totally a stranger to them, they asked, "Who art thou and whose son?" Thus questioned, the man replied, "Ye heroes, I am the son of Hiraniadonis, king of the Nishidas. Know me also for a pupil of Drona, laboring for the mastery of the art of arms." Vaisampayana continued, the Pandavas then, having made themselves acquainted with everything connected with him, returned to the city. And going unto Drona, told him of that wonderful feat of archery which they had witnessed in the woods. Arjuna, in particular, thinking all the while, O king, Eklavya, saw Drona in private and relying upon his preceptor's affection for him, said, "Thou hadst lovingly told me, clasping me, to thy bosom, that no pupil of thine should be equal to me. Why then is there a pupil of thine, the mighty son of the Nishada king, superior to me?" Vaisampayana continued, on hearing these words, Drona reflected for a moment, and resolving upon the course of action he should follow, took Arjuna with him and went unto the Nishada prince. And he beheld Eklavya, with body besmeared with filth, matted locks, on head, clad in rags, bearing a bow in hand and ceaselessly shooting arrows therefrom. And when Eklavya saw Drona approaching towards him, he went a few steps forward, and touched his feet and prostrate himself on the ground. And the son of the Nishada king worshipping Drona, duly represented himself as his pupil, and clasping his hands in reverence stood before him, awaiting his commands. Then Drona, O king, addressed Eklavya, saying, If, O hero, thou art really my pupil, give me then my fees. On hearing these words, Eklavya was very much gratified, and said in reply, O illustrious preceptor, what shall I give? Command me, for there is nothing, O foremost of all persons conversant with the Vedas, that I may not give unto my preceptor. Drona answered, O Eklavya, if thou art really intent on making me a gift, I should like then to have the thumb of thy right hand. Vaisampayana continued, hearing these cruel words of Drona, who had asked of him his thumb as tuition fee, Eklavya, ever devoted to truth, and desirous also of keeping his promise, with a cheerful face and an unafflicted heart cut off without ado his thumb, and gave it unto Drona. After this, when the Nishada prince began once more to shoot with the help of his remaining fingers, he found, O king, that he had lost his former lightness of hand. And at this Arjuna became happy, the fever of jealousy having left him. Two of Drona's pupils became very much accomplished in the use of mace. These were Druvodhana and Bhima, who were, however, always jealous of each other. Aswatthama excelled everyone, in the mysteries of the science of arms. The twins, Nakula and Sahadeva, excelled everybody in handling the sword. Yudhishthira surpassed everybody as a car warrior. But Arjuna, however, outdistanced everyone in every respect in intelligence, resourcefulness, strength, and perseverance. Accomplished in all weapons, Arjuna became the foremost of even the foremost of car warriors, and his fame spread all over the earth to the verge of the sea. And although the instruction was the same, the mighty Arjuna excelled all the princes in lightness of hand. Indeed, in weapons as in devotion to his preceptor, he became the foremost of them all. And amongst all the princes, Arjuna alone became an Atiratha, a car warrior, capable of fighting at one time with 60,000 foes. And the wicked sons of Dhritarashtra, beholding Bhimasena endued with great strength and Arjuna accomplished in all arms, became very jealous of them. O bull among men, one day Drona, desirous of testing the comparative excellence of all his pupils in the use of arms, collected them all together after their education had been completed. And before assembling them together, he had caused an artificial bird, as the would-be aim, to be placed on the top of a neighboring tree. And when they were all together, Drona said unto them, Take up your bows quickly and stand here, aiming at that bird on the tree, with arrows fixed on your bowstrings. Shoot and cut off the bird's head, as soon as I give the order. I shall give each of you a turn, one by one, my children. Vaisampayana continued, Then Drona, that foremost of all Angara's sons, first addressed Yudhishthira saying, O irrepressible one, aim with thy arrow and shoot as soon as I give the order. Yudhishthira took up the bow first, as desired, O king, by his preceptor, and stood aiming at the bird. But, O bull of Bharata's race, Drona in an instant, addressing the Kuru prince standing with bow in hand, said, Behold, O prince, that bird on top of the tree. Yudhishthira replied unto his preceptor, saying, I do. But the next instant Drona again asked him, What dost thou see now, O prince? Seest thou the tree, myself or thy brothers? Yudhishthira answered, I see the tree, myself, my brothers, and the bird. Drona repeated his question, but was answered as often in the same words. Drona then, vexed with Yudhishthira, reproachingly said, stand thou apart. It is not for thee to strike the aim. Then Drona repeated the experiment with Duryodhana and the other sons of Dhritarashtra, one after another. As also with his other pupils, Bhima and the rest, including the princes that had come unto him from other lands. But the answer in every case was the same as Yudhishthira's, viz., we behold the tree, thyself, our fellow pupils, and the bird. And reproached by their preceptor, they were all ordered, one after another, to stand apart. Section CXXXV. Sambhava Parva continued. Vaisampayana said, when everyone had failed, Drona smilingly called Arjuna and said unto him, by thee the aim must be shot, therefore, turn thy eyes to it. Thou must let fly the arrow as soon as I give the order. Therefore, O son, stand here with bow and arrow for an instant. Thus addressed, Arjuna stood aiming at the bird as desired by his preceptor, with his bow bent. An instant after Drona asked him, as in the case of others, seest thou, O Arjuna, the bird there, the tree, and myself? Arjuna replied, I see the bird only, but nor the tree, or thyself. Then the irrepressible Drona, well pleased with Arjuna, the instant after, again said unto that mighty car warrior amongst the Pandavas, if thou seest the vulture, then describe it to me. Arjuna said, I see only the head of the vulture, not its body. At these words of Arjuna, the hair on Drona's body stood on end from delight. He then said to Parth, shoot. And the latter instantly let fly his arrow, and with his sharp shaft speedily struck off the head of the vulture on the tree and brought it down to the ground. No sooner was the deed done than Drona clasped Falguna to his bosom and thought Drupada with his friends had already been vanquished in fight. Some time after, O bull of Bharata's race, Drona, accompanied by all of his pupils, went to the bank of the Ganga to bathe in that sacred stream. And when Drona had plunged into the stream, a strong alligator, sent as it were by death himself, seized him by the thigh. And though himself quite capable, Drona in a seeming hurry asked his pupil to rescue him. And he said, Oh, kill this monster and rescue me. Contemporaneously with this speech, Vibhatsu, Arjuna, struck the monster within the water with 5 sharp arrows irresistible in their course, while the other pupils stood confounded, each at his place. Beholding Arjuna's readiness, Drona considered him to be the foremost of all his pupils, and became highly pleased. The monster, in the meantime cut into pieces by the arrows of Arjuna, released the thigh of illustrious Drona and gave up the ghost. The son of Bharadvaja then addressed the illustrious and mighty car warrior Arjuna and said, Accept, O thou of mighty arms, this very superior and irresistible weapon called Brahmasura with the methods of hurling and recalling it. Thou must not, however, ever use it against any human foe, for if hurled at any foe endued with inferior energy, it might burn the whole universe. It is said, O child, that this weapon hath not a peer in the 3 worlds. Keep it, therefore, with great care, and listen to what I say. If ever, O hero, any foe, not human, contendeth against thee, thou mayst then employ it against him for compassing his death in battle. Pledging himself to do what he was bid, Vibhatsu then, with joined hands, received that great weapon. The preceptor then, addressing him again, said, None else in this world will ever become a superior bowman to thee. Vanquished thou shalt never be by any foe, and thy achievements will be great. Section 30. Sambhava Parva continued. Vaisampayana said, O thou of Bharata's race, beholding the sons of Dhritarashtra and Pandu accomplished in arms, Drona, O monarch, addressed King Dhritarashtra, in the presence of Kripa, Somadatta, Valhika, the wise son of Ganga, Bhishma, Vyasa and Vijara, and said, O best of Kuru kings, thy children have completed their education. With thy permission, O king, let them now show their proficiency. Hearing him, the king said, with a gladdened heart, O best of Brahmanas, thou hast, indeed, accomplished a great deed. Command me thyself as to the place and the time where and when and the manner also in which the trial may be held. Grief arising from my own blindness maketh me envy those who, blessed with sight, will behold my children's prowess in arm. O Kshatri, Vijara, do all that Drona saith. O thou devoted to virtue, I think there is nothing that can be more agreeable to me. Then Vijara, giving the necessary assurance to the king, went out to do what he was bid. And Drona endued with great wisdom, then measured out a piece of land that was void of trees and thickets and furnished with wells and springs. And upon the spot of land so measured out, Drona, that first of eloquent men, selecting a lunar day when the star ascendant was auspicious, offered up sacrifice unto the gods in the presence of the citizens assembled by proclamation to witness the same. And then, O bold among men, the artificers of the king built thereon a large and elegant stage according to the rules laid down in the scriptures, and it was furnished with all kinds of weapons. They also built another elegant hall for the lady spectators. And the citizens constructed many platforms while the wealthier of them pitched many spacious and high tents all around. When the day fixed for the tournament came, the king accompanied by his ministers, with Bhishma and Kripa, the foremost of preceptors, walking ahead, came unto that theatre of almost celestial beauty constructed of pure gold, and decked with strings of pearls and stones of lapis lazuli. And, O first of victorious men, Gandhari blessed with great good fortune, and Kunti, and the other ladies of the royal household, in gorgeous attire and accompanied by their waiting women, joyfully ascended the platforms, like celestial ladies ascending the Sumuru mountain. And the four orders including the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas, desirous of beholding the prince's skill in arms, left the city and came running to the spot. And so impatient was every one to behold the spectacle, that the vast crowd assembled there in almost an instant. And with the sounds of trumpets and drums and the noise of many voices, that vast concourse appeared like an agitated ocean. At last, Drona accompanied by his son, dressed in white attire, with a white sacred thread, white locks, white beard, white garlands, and white sandal paste rubbed over his body, entered the lists. It seemed as if the moon himself accompanied by the planet Mars appeared in an unclouded sky. On entering Bharadvaja performed timely worship and caused Brahmanas versed in mantras to celebrate the auspicious rites. And after auspicious and sweet-sounding musical instruments had been struck up as a propitiatory ceremony, some persons entered, equipped with various arms. And then having girded up their loins, those mighty warriors, those foremost ones of Bharata's race, the princes, entered, furnished with finger protectors, gauntlet and bows and quivers. And with Yudhishthira at their head, the valiant princes entered in order of age, and began to show wonderful skill with their weapons. Some of the spectators lowered their heads, apprehending fall of arrows, while others fearlessly gazed on with wonder. And riding swiftly on horses and managing them dexterously, the princes began to hit marks with shafts engraved with their respective names. And seeing the prowess of the princes armed with bows and arrows, the spectators thought that they were beholding the city of the Gandharvas, became filled with amazement. And, O Bharata, all on a sudden, some hundreds and thousands, with eyes wide open in wonder, exclaimed, "Well done! Well done!" And having repeatedly displayed their skill and dexterity in the use of bows and arrows and in the management of cars, the mighty warriors took up their swords and bucklers, and began to range the lists, playing their weapons. The spectators saw, with wonder, their agility, the symmetry of their bodies, their grace, their calmness, the firmness of their grasp and their deftness in the use of sword and buckler. Then Vrkodara and Suyudhana, internally delighted, at the prospect of fight, entered the arena, mace in hand, like two single-peaked mountains. And those mighty armed warriors braced their loins, and summoning all their energy, roared like two infuriate elephants contending for a cow-elephant, and like two infuriated elephants those mighty heroes faultlessly, in consonance with the dictates of the science of arm, careered right and left, circling the lists. And Vijaya described to Dhritarashtra and the mother of the Pandavas, Kunti, and Gandhari, all the feats of the princes. Section 30I. Sambhava Parva continued. Vaisampayana continued, upon the Kuru king and Bhima, the foremost of all endued with strength, having entered the arena, the spectators were divided into two parties in consequence of the partiality swaying their affections. Some cried, "Behold the heroic king of the Kurus." Some, "Behold Bhima." And on account of these cries, there was all on a sudden, a loud uproar. And seeing the place become like a troubled ocean, the intelligent Bharadvaja said unto his dear son Aswathaman, "Restrain both these mighty warriors so proficient in arms. Let not the ire of the assembly be provoked by this combat of Bhima and Duryodhana." Vaisampayana continued, then the son of the preceptor of the princes, "Restrain those combatants with their maces uplifted and resembling to swollen oceans agitated by the winds that blow at the universal dissolution." And Drona himself entering the yard of the arena commanded the musicians to stop, and with a voice deep as that of the clouds, addressed these words, "Behold ye now that Parth who is dearer to me than my own son, the master of all arms, the son of Indra himself, and like unto the younger brother of Indra, Vishnu." And having performed the propitiatory rites, the youthful Falguna, equipped with the finger protector, gauntlet, and his quiver full of shafts and bow in hand, donning his golden mail, appeared in the lists even like an evening cloud, reflecting the rays of the setting sun and illumined by the hues of the rainbow and flashes of lightning. On seeing Arjuna, the whole assembly were delighted, and conchs began to be blown all around with other musical instruments. And there arose a great uproar in consequence of the spectators exclaiming, "This is the graceful son of Kunti. This is the middle, third, Pandava. This is the son of the mighty Indra. This is the protector of the Kurus. This is the foremost of those versed in arms. This is the foremost of all cherishers of virtue. This is the foremost of the persons of correct behavior, the great repository of the knowledge of manners." At those exclamations, the tears of Kunti, mixing with the milk of her breast, wetted her bosom. And his ears being filled with that uproar, that first of men, Dhritarashtra, asked Vijaya in delight, "O Kshatri, what is this great uproar for, like unto that of the troubled ocean, arising all on a sudden and rending the very heavens?" Vijaya replied, "O mighty monarch, the son of Pandu and Parita, Falguna, clad in mail hath entered the lists. And hence this uproar." Dhritarashtra said, O thou of soul so great, by the three fires sprung from Parita who is even like the sacred fuel, I have, indeed, been blessed, favored and protected. Vaisampayana continued, when the spectators, excited with delight, had somewhat regained their equanimity, Vibhatsu began to display his lightness in the use of weapons. By the Agneya weapon, he created fire. And by the Varuna weapon he created water, by the Vayavya weapon, he created air, and by the Parjanya weapon he created clouds. And by the Bhama weapon, he created land, and by the Parvatya weapon, he brought mountains into being. By the Antardhana weapon all these were made to disappear. Now the beloved one of his preceptor, Arjuna, appeared tall. And now short, now he was seen on the yoke of his car, and now on the car itself, and the next moment he was on the ground. And the hero favored by his practiced dexterity, hit with his various butts some tender, some fine and some of thick composition. And like one shaft, he let fly at a time into the mouth of a moving iron bore 5 shafts together from his bowstring. And that hero of mighty energy discharged 21 arrows into the hollow of a cow's horn hung up on a rope swaying to and fro. In this manner, O sinless one, Arjuna showed his profound skill in the use of sword, bow, and mace, walking over the lists in circles. And, O Bharata, when the exhibition had well nigh ended, the excitement of the spectators had cooled, and the sounds of instruments had died out. There was heard proceeding from the gate, the slapping of arms, betokening might and strength, and even like unto the roar of the thunder. And, O king, as soon as this sound was heard, the assembled multitude instantly thought, are the mountains splitting or is the earth itself rending asunder, or is the welkin resounding with the roar of gathering clouds? And then all the spectators turned their eyes towards the gate. And Drona stood, surrounded by the 5 brothers, the sons of Parita, and looked like the moon in conjunction with the 5-starred constellation Asta. And Duryodhana, that slayer of foes, stood up in haste and was surrounded by his century of haughty brothers with Aswathaman amongst them. And that prince, mace in hand, thus surrounded by his 100 brothers with uplifted weapons appeared like Purandara in days of yore, encircled by the celestial host on the occasion of the battle with the Danavas. Section 38. Sambhava Parva continued. Vaisampayana continued, when the spectators, with eyes expanded with wonder, made way for that subjugator of hostile cities, Karna, that hero. With his natural mail and face brightened with earrings, took up his bow, and girded on his sword, and then entered the spacious lists, like a walking cliff. That far-famed destroyer of hostile hosts, the large-eyed Karna, was born of Parita in her maidenhood. He was a portion of the hot-beamed sun, and his energy and prowess were like unto those of the lion, or the bull, or the leader of a herd of elephants. In splendor he resembled the sun, in loveliness the moon, and in energy the fire. Begotten by the sun himself, he was tall in stature like a golden palm tree, and, endued with the vigor of youth, he was capable of slaying a lion. Handsome in features, he was possessed of countless accomplishments. The mighty armed warrior, eyeing all around the arena, bowed indifferently to Drona and Kripa. And the entire assembly, motionless and with steadfast gaze, thought, who is he? And they became agitated in their curiosity to know the warrior. And that foremost of eloquent men, the offspring of the sun, in a voice deep as that of the clouds, addressed his unknown brother, the son of the subduer of the Asura, Paka, Indra, saying, O Parth, I shall perform feats before this gazing multitude, excelling all thou hast performed. Beholding them, thou shall be amazed. And, O thou best of those blessed with speech, he had hardly done when the spectators stood up all at once, uplifted by some instrument, as it were. And, O tiger among men, Duryodhana was filled with delight, while Vibhatsu was instantly all abashment and anger. Then, with the permission of Drona, the mighty Karna, delighting in battle, there did all that Parth had done before. And, O Bharata, Duryodhana, with his brothers thereupon embraced Karna in joy and then addressed him, saying, Welcome, O mighty armed warrior! I have obtained thee by good fortune, O polite one. Live thou as thou pleasest, and command me, and the kingdom of the Kurus. Kama replied, When thou hast said it, I regard it as already accomplished. I only long for thy friendship. And, O Lord, my wish is even for a single combat with Arjuna. Duryodhana said, Do thou with me enjoy the good things of life. Be thou the benefactor of thy friend, and, O repressor of enemies, place thou thy feet on the heads of all foes. Vaisampayana continued, Arjuna, after this, deeming himself disgraced, said unto Karna stationed amidst the brothers like unto a cliff, that path which the unwelcome intruder and the uninvited talker cometh to, shall be thine, O Karna, for thou shalt be slain by me. Karna replied, This arena is meant for all, not for thee alone, O Falguna. They are kings who are superior in energy, and verily the Kshatriya regardeth might and might alone. What need of altercation which is the exercise of the weak? O Bharata, speak then in arrows until with arrows I strike off thy head today before the preceptor himself. Vaisampayana continued, hastily embraced by his brothers, Parth that subduer of hostile cities, with the permission of Drona, advanced for the combat. On the other side, Karna, having been embraced by Duryodhana with his brothers, taking up his bow and arrows, stood ready for the fight. Then the firmament became enveloped in clouds emitting flashes of lightning, and the colored bow of Indra appeared shedding its effulgent rays. And the clouds seemed to laugh on account of the rows of white cranes that were then on the wing. And seeing Indra thus viewing the arena from affection for his son, the sun too dispersed the clouds from over his own offspring. And Falguna remained deep hid under cover of the clouds, while Karna remained visible, being surrounded by the rays of the sun. And the son of Dhritarashtra stood by Karna, and Bharadvaja and Kripa and Bhishma remained with Parth. And the assembly was divided, as also the female spectators. And knowing the state of things, Kunti the daughter of Bhoja, swooned away. And by the help of female attendants, Vijaya, versed in the lore of all duties, revived the insensible Kunti by sprinkling sandal paste and water on her person. On being restored to consciousness, Kunti, seeing her two sons clad in mail, was seized with fear, but she could do nothing to protect them. And beholding both the warriors with bows strung in their hands, the son of Saradwat, viz. Kripa, knowing all duties and cognizant of the rules regulating duels, addressed Karna, saying, This Pandava, who is the youngest son of Kunti, belongeth to the Kaurava race, he will engage in combat with thee. But, O mighty armed one, thou too must tell us thy lineage and the names of thy father and mother and the royal line of which thou art the ornament. Learning all this, Parth will fight with thee or not, as he will think fit. Sons of kings never fight with men of inglorious lineage. Vaisampayana continued, when he was thus addressed by Kripa, Karna's countenance became like unto a lotus pale and torn with the pelting showers in the rainy season. Duryodhana said, O preceptor, verily the scriptures have it that three classes of persons can lay claim to royalty, viz., persons of the blood royal, heroes, and lastly, those that lead armies. If Fulguna is unwilling to fight with one who is not a king, I will install Karna as king of Anga. Vaisampayana said, at that very moment, seated on a golden seat, with parched paddy and with flowers and water pots and much gold, the mighty warrior Karna was installed king by Brahmanas versed in mantras. And the royal umbrella was held over his head, while yak tails waved around that redoubtable hero of graceful mien. And the cheers, having ceased, King Karna said unto the Kaurava Duryodhana, O tiger among monarchs, what shall I give unto thee that may compare with thy gift of a kingdom? O king, I will do all thou biddest. And Suyadhana said unto him, I eagerly wish for thy friendship. Thus spoken to, Karna replied, Be it so. And they embraced each other in joy, and experienced great happiness. Section 36. Sambhava Parva continued. Vaisampayana said, after this, with his sheet loosely hanging down, Adhiratha entered the lists, perspiring and trembling, and supporting himself on a staff. Seeing him, Karna left his bow and impelled by filial regard bowed down, his head still wet with the water of inauguration. And then the charioteer, hurriedly covering his feet with the end of his sheet, addressed Karna crowned with success as his son. And the charioteer embraced Karna and from excess of affection bedewed his head with tears, that head still wet with the water sprinkled over it on account of the coronation as king of Anga. Seeing the charioteer, the Pandava Bhimasena took Karna for a charioteer's son, and said by way of ridicule, O son of a charioteer, thou dost not deserve death in fight at the hands of Parth. As befits thy race take thou anon the whip. And, O worst of mortals, surely thou art not worthy to sway the kingdom of Anga, even as a dog doth not deserve the butter placed before the sacrificial fire. Karna, thus addressed, with slightly quivering lips fetched a deep sigh, looked at the god of the day in the skies. And even as a mad elephant riseth from an assemblage of lotuses, the mighty Duryodhana rose in wrath from among his brothers, and addressed that performer of dreadful deeds. Bhimasena, present there, over Kodara, it behoveth thee not to speak such words. Might is the cardinal virtue of a Kshatriya, and even a Kshatriya of inferior birth deserveth to be fought with. The lineage of heroes, like the sources of a lordly river, is ever unknown. The fire that covereth the whole world riseth from the waters. The thunder that slayeth the Danavas was made of a bone of a mortal named Davichi. The illustrious deity Guha, who combines in his composition the portions of all the other deities, is of a lineage unknown. Some call him the offspring of Agni, some of Kritika, some of Rudra, and some of Ganga. It hath been heard by us that persons born in the Kshatriya order have become Brahmanas. Visvamitra and others, born Kshatriyas, have obtained the eternal Brahma. The foremost of all wielders of weapons, the preceptor Drona hath been born in a waterpot, and Kripa of the race of Gautama hath sprung from a clump of heath. Your own births, ye Pandava princes, are known to me. Can a she-deer bring forth a tiger, like Karna, of the splendor of the sun, and endued with every auspicious mark, and born also with a natural male and earrings? This prince among men deserveth the sovereignty of the world, not of Anga only, in consequence of the might of his arm and my swearing to obey him in everything. If there be anybody here to whom all that I have done unto Karna hath become intolerable, let him ascend his chariot and bend his bow with the help of his feet. Vaisampayana continued, then there arose a confused murmur amongst the spectators approving of Duryodhana's speech. The sun, however, went down. But Prince Duryodhana taking Karna's hand led him out of the arena, lighted with countless lamps. And, O king, the Pandavas also, accompanied by Drona and Kripa and Bhishma, returned to their abodes. And the people, too, came away, some naming Arjuna, some Karna, and some Duryodhana, as the victor of the day. And Kunti, recognizing her son in Karna by the various auspicious marks on his person and beholding him installed in the sovereignty of Anga, was from motherly affection, very pleased. And Duryodhana, O monarch, having obtained Karna, in this way, banished his fears arising out of Arjuna's proficiency in arms. And the heroic Karna, accomplished in arms, began to gratify Duryodhana by sweet speeches. While Yudhishthira was impressed with the belief that there was no warrior on earth like unto Karna. Section CXL. Sambhava Parva continued. Vaisampayana continued, beholding the Pandavas and the son of Dhritarashtra accomplished in arms, Drona thought the time had come when he could demand the preceptorial fee. And, O king, assembling his pupils one day together, the preceptor Drona asked of them the fee, saying, seize Drupada, the king of Panchala in battle and bring him unto me. That shall be the most acceptable fee. Those warriors then answering, so be it, speedily mounted up on their chariots, and for bestowing upon their preceptor the fee he had demanded, marched out, accompanied by him. Those bulls among men, smiting the Panchalas on their way, laid siege to the capital of the great Drupada. And Duryodhana and Karna and the mighty Yuyutsu and Dasasana and Vikarna and Jalasandha and Sulochana these and many other foremost of Kshatriya princes of great prowess, vied with one another in becoming the foremost in the attack. And the princes, riding in first-class chariots and following the cavalry, entered the hostile capital, and proceeded along the streets. Meanwhile, the king of Panchala, beholding that mighty force and hearing its loud clamour, came out of his palace, accompanied by his brothers. Though King Yajanasena was well armed, the Kuru army assailed him with a shower of arrows, uttering their war cry. Yajanasena, however, not easy to be subdued in battle, approaching the Kurus upon his white chariot, began to rain his fierce arrows around. Before the battle commenced, Arjuna, beholding the pride of prowess displayed by the princes, addressed his preceptor, that best of Brahmanas, Drona, and said, we shall exert ourselves after these have displayed their prowess. The king of Panchala can never be taken on the field of the battle by any of these. Having said this, the sinless son of Kunti, surrounded by his brothers, waited outside the town at a distance of a mile from it. Meanwhile Drupada, beholding the Kuru host, rushed forward and pouring a fierce shower of arrows around, terribly afflicted the Kuru ranks. And such was his lightness of motion on the field of battle that, though he was fighting unsupported on a single chariot, the Kurus from panic supposed that there were many Drupadas opposed to them. And the fierce arrows of that monarch fell fast on all sides, till conchs and trumpets and drums by thousands began to be sounded by the Panchalas from their houses, giving the alarm. Then there arose from the mighty Panchala host a roar terrible as that of the lion, while the twang of their bowstrings seemed to rend the very heavens. Then Duryodhana and Vikarna, Suvahua and Durgalakana and Dasasana, becoming furious, began to shower their arrows upon the enemy. But the mighty bowmen, Prishitas, son, invincible in battle, though very much pierced with the arrows of the enemy, instantly began, O Bharata, to afflict the hostile ranks with greater vigor. And careering over the field of battle like a fiery wheel, King Drupada with his arrows smote Duryodhana and Vikarna and even the mighty Karna and many other heroic princes and numberless warriors, and slaked their thirst for battle. Then all the citizens showered upon the Kurus various missiles like clouds showering raindrops upon the earth. Young and old, they all rushed to battle, assailing the Kurus with vigor. The Kauravas, then, O Bharata, beholding the battle become frightful, broke and fled wailing towards the Pandavas. The Pandavas, hearing the terrible wail of the beaten host, reverentially saluted Drona and ascended their chariots. Then Arjuna, hastily bidding Yudhishthira not to engage in the fight, rushed forward. Appointing the sons of Madri, Nakula and Sahadeva, the protectors of his chariot wheels, while Bhimasena, ever fighting in the van, mace in hand, ran ahead. The sinless Arjuna, thus accompanied by his brothers, hearing the shouts of the enemy, advanced towards them, filling the whole region with the rattle of his chariot wheels. And like a Makara entering the sea, the mighty armed Bhima, resembling a second Yama, mace in hand, entered the Panchala ranks, fiercely roaring like the ocean in a tempest. And Bhima, mace in hand, first rushed towards the array of elephants in the hostile force, while Arjuna, proficient in battle, assailed that force with the prowess of his arms. And Bhima, like the great destroyer himself, began to slay those elephants with his mace. Those huge animals, like unto mountains, struck with Bhima's mace, had their heads broken into pieces. Covered with stream of blood, they began to fall upon the ground like cliffs loosened by thunder. And the Pandavas prostrate on the ground elephants and horses and cars by thousands and slew many foot soldiers and many car warriors. Indeed, as a herdsman in the woods driveth before him with his staff countless cattle with ease, so did Virkodara drive before him the chariots and elephants of the hostile force. Meanwhile, Falguna, impelled by the desire of doing good unto Bharadvaja's son, assailed the son of Prihata with a shower of arrows, and felled him from the elephant on which he was seated. And, O monarch, Arjuna, like unto the terrible fire that consumeth all things at the end of the yuga, began to prostrate on the ground horses and cars and elephants by thousands. The Panchalas and the Srinjayas, on the other hand, thus assailed by the Pandava, met him with a perfect shower of weapons of various kinds. And they sent up a loud shout and fought desperately with Arjuna. The battle became furious and terrible to behold. Hearing the enemy's shouts, the son of Indra was filled with wrath and assailing the hostile host with a thick shower of arrows, rushed towards it furiously afflicting it with renewed vigor. They who observed the illustrious Arjuna at that time could not mark any interval between his fixing the arrows on the bowstring and letting them off. Loud were the shouts that rose there, mingled with cheers of approval. Then the king of the Panchalas, accompanied by the generalissimo of his forces, Satyajit, rushed with speed at Arjuna like the Azura Samvara, rushing at the chief of the celestials, in days of yore. Then Arjuna covered the king of Panchala with a shower of arrows. Then there arose a frightful uproar among the Panchala host like unto the roar of a mighty lion springing at the leader of a herd of elephants. And beholding Arjuna rushing at the king of Panchala to seize him, Satyajit of great prowess rushed at him. And the two warriors, like unto Indra and the Azura Virakana's son, Vala, approaching each other for combat, began to grind each other's ranks. Then Arjuna with great force pierced Satyajit with 10 keen shafts, at which feat the spectators were all amazed. But Satyajit, without losing any time, assailed Arjuna with 100 shafts. Then that mighty car warrior, Arjuna, endued with remarkable lightness of motion, thus covered by that shower of arrows, rubbed his bowstring to increase the force and velocity of his shafts. Then cutting in twain his antagonist's bow, Arjuna rushed at the king of the Panchalas, but Satyajit, quickly taking up a tougher bow, pierced with his arrows Parth, his chariot, charioteer, and horses. Arjuna, thus assailed in battle by the Panchala warrior, forgave not his foe. Eager to slay him at once, he pierced with a number of arrows his antagonist's horses, flags, bow, clenched, left, fist, charioteer, and the attendant at his back. Then Satyajit, finding his bows repeatedly cut in twain and his horses slain, desisted from the fight. The king of the Panchalas, beholding his general thus discomfited in the encounter, himself began to shower his arrows upon the Pandava prince. Then Arjuna, that foremost of warriors, crowned with success, began to fight furiously, and quickly cutting his enemy's bow in twain as also his flagstaff, which he caused to fall down, pierced his antagonist's horses and charioteer also with 5 arrows. Then throwing aside his bow, Arjuna took his quiver, and taking out a scimitar and sending forth a loud shout, leaped from his own chariot upon that of his foe. And standing there with perfect fearlessness, he seized Drupada as Garuda seizeth a huge snake after agitating the waters of the ocean. At the sight of this, the Panchala troops ran away in all directions. Then Dhananjaya, having thus exhibited the might of his arm in the presence of both hosts, sent forth a loud shout and came out of the Panchala ranks. And beholding him returning, with his captive, the princes began to lay waste Drupada's capital. Addressing them, Arjuna said, "This best of monarchs, Drupada, is a relative of the Kuru heroes. Therefore, O Bhima, slay not his soldiers. Let us only give unto our preceptor his fee." Vaisampayana continued, "O king, thus prevented by Arjuna, the mighty Bhimasena, though unsatiated with the exercise of battle, refrained from the act of slaughter. And, O bull of the Bharata race, the princes then, taking Drupada with them after having seized him on the field of battle, along with his friends and counselors, offered him unto Drona. And Drona, beholding Drupada thus brought under complete control, humiliated and deprived of wealth, remembered that monarch's former hostility and, addressing him, said, "Thy kingdom and capital have been laid waste by me. But fear not for thy life, though it dependeth now on the will of thy foe. Dost thou now desire to revive thy friendship with me?" Having said this, he smiled a little and again said, "Fear not for thy life, brave king. We, Brahmanas, are ever forgiving. And, O bull among Kshatriyas, my affection and love for thee have grown with me in consequence of our having sported together in childhood in the hermitage. Therefore, O king, I ask for thy friendship again. And as a boon, unasked, I give thee half the kingdom that was thine. Thou toldest me before that none who was not a king could be a king's friend. Therefore is it, O Yajanasena, that I retain half thy kingdom. Thou art the king of all the territory lying on the southern side of the Bhagirathi, while I become king of all the territory on the north of that river. And, O Panchala, if it pleaseth thee, know me hence for thy friend." On hearing these words, Drupada answered, "Thou art of noble soul and great prowess. Therefore, O Brahmana, I am not surprised at what thou doest. I am very much gratified with thee, and I desire thy eternal friendship. Vaisampayana continued, after this, O Bharata, Drona released the king of Panchala, and cheerfully performing the usual offices of regard, bestowed upon him half the kingdom. Thenceforth Drupada began to reside sorrowfully in the city of Campilya within the province of Maykandi on the banks of the Ganga filled with many towns and cities. And after his defeat by Drona, Drupada also ruled the southern Panchalas up to the bank of the Chermanwadi river. And Drupada from that day was well convinced that he could not, by Kshatriya might alone, defeat Drona, being very much his inferior in Brahma, spiritual power. And he, therefore, began to wander over the whole earth to find out the means of obtaining a son who would subjugate his Brahmana foe. Meanwhile Drona continued to reside in Ahikatra. Thus, O king, was the territory of Ahikatra full of towns and cities, obtained by Arjuna, and bestowed upon Drona. Section CXLI. Sambhava Parva continued. Vaisampayana continued, after the expiration, O king, of a year from this, Dhritarashtra, moved by kindness for the people, installed Yudhishthira, the son of Pandu, as the heir apparent of the kingdom on account of his firmness, fortitude, patience, benevolence, frankness and unswerving honesty of heart. And within a short time Yudhishthira, the son of Kunti, by his good behavior, manners and close application to business, overshadowed the deeds of his father. And the second Pandava, Vrkodara, began to receive continued lessons from Sankarsana, Balarama, in encounters with the sword and the mace and on the chariot. And after Bhima's education was finished, he became in strength like unto Dhyamatsana himself, and continuing to live in harmony with his brothers, he began to exert his prowess. And Arjuna became celebrated for the firmness of his grasp of weapons, for his lightness of motion, precision of aim, and his proficiency in the use of the Keshura, Naracha, Vala and Vipada weapons. Indeed, of all weapons, whether straight or crooked or heavy. And Drona certified that there was none in the world who was equal to Arjuna in lightness of hand and general proficiency. One day, Drona, addressing Arjuna before the assembled Kaurava princes, said, there was a disciple of Agastya in the science of arms called Agni Vesa. He was my preceptor and I, his disciple. By ascetic merit I obtained from him a weapon called Brahmasura, which could never be futile, and which was like unto thunder itself, capable of consuming the whole earth. That weapon, O Bharata, from what I have done, may now pass from disciple to disciple. While imparting it to me, my preceptor said, O son of Bharadvaja, never shouldst thou hurl this weapon at any human being, especially at one who is of poor energy. Thou hast, O hero, obtained that celestial weapon. None else deserveth it. But obey the command of the Rishi, Agni Vesa. And, look here, Arjuna, give me now the preceptorial fee in the presence of these thy cousins and relatives. When Arjuna, on hearing this, pledged his word that he would give what the preceptor demanded, the latter said, O sinless one, thou must fight with me when I fight with thee. And that bull among the Kuru princes thereupon pledged his word unto Drona, and touching his feet, went away northward. Then there arose a loud shout covering the whole earth, bounded by her belt of seas, to the effect that there was no bowman in the whole world like unto Arjuna. And, indeed, Dhananjaya, in encounters with the mace and the sword and on the chariot as also with the bow, acquired wonderful proficiency. Sahdeva obtained the whole science of morality and duties. from Vrihaspati, the spiritual chief of celestials, and continued to live under the control of his brothers. And Nakula, the favorite of his brothers taught by Drona, became known as a skillful warrior and a great car warrior, ati Rata. Indeed, Arjuna and the other Pandava princes became so powerful that they slew in battle the great Savara who had performed a sacrifice extending over 3 years, undaunted by the raids of the Gandharvas, and the king of the Yavnas himself, whom the powerful Pandu even had failed to bring under subjection, was brought by Arjuna under control. Then again Vipula, the king of the Savaras, endued with great prowess, who had always shown a disregard for the Kurus, was made by the intelligent Arjuna to feel the edge of his power. And Arjuna also repressed by means of his arrows the pride of King Sumitra of Savara, also known by the name of Dattamitra, who had resolutely sought an encounter with him. The third of the Pandava princes, assisted by Bhima, on only a single car subjugated all the kings of the east, backed by 10,000 cars. In the same way, having conquered on a single car the whole of the south, Dhananjaya sent unto the kingdom of the Kurus a large booty. Thus did those foremost of men, the illustrious Pandavas, conquering the territories of other kings, extend the limits of their own kingdom. But, beholding the great prowess and strength of those mighty bowmen, King Dhritarashtra's sentiments towards the Pandavas became suddenly poisoned. And from that day the monarch became so anxious that he could hardly sleep. Section Xli. Sambhava Parva continued. Vaisampayana continued, on hearing that the heroic sons of Pandu endued with excess of energy had become so mighty, King Dhritarashtra became very miserable with anxiety. Then summoning unto his side Kanaka, that foremost of minister, well versed in the science of politics and an expert in counsels, the king said, O best of Brahmanas, the Pandavas are daily overshadowing the earth. I am exceedingly jealous of them. Should I have peace or war with them? O Kanaka, advise me truly, for I shall do as thou biddest. Vaisampayana continued, that best of Brahmanas, thus addressed by the king, freely answered him in these pointed words, well agreeing with the import of political science. Listen to me, O sinless king, as I answer thee. And, O best of Kuru kings, it behoveth thee not to be angry with me after hearing all I say. Kings should ever be ready with uplifted maces, to strike when necessary, and they should ever increase their prowess carefully. Avoiding all faults themselves, they should ceaselessly watch over the faults of their foes and take advantage of them. If the king is always ready to strike, everybody feareth him. Therefore the king should ever have recourse to chastisement in all he doth. He should so conduct himself that his foe may not detect any weak side in him. But by means of the weakness he detecteth in his foe he should pursue him to destruction. He should always conceal, like the tortoise concealing its body, his means and ends, and he should always keep back his own weakness from the sight of others. And having begun a particular act, he should ever accomplish it thoroughly. Behold, a thorn, if not extracted wholly, produceth a festering sore. The slaughter of a foe who doth thee evil is always praiseworthy. If the foe be one of great prowess, one should always watch for the hour of his disaster and then kill him without any scruples. If he should happen to be a great warrior, his hour of disaster also should be watched, and he should then be induced to fly. O sire, an enemy should never be scorned, however contemptible. A spark of fire is capable of consuming an extensive forest if only it can spread from one object to another in proximity. Kings should sometimes feign blindness and deafness, for if impotent to chastise, they should pretend not to. Notice the faults that call for chastisement. On occasions, such as these, let them regard their bows as made of straw. But they should be always on the alert like a herd of deer sleeping in the woods. When thy foe is in thy power, destroy him by every means open or secret. Do not show him any mercy, although he seek thy protection. A foe, or one that hath once injured thee, should be destroyed by lavishing money, if necessary, for by killing him thou mayest be at thy ease. The dead can never inspire fear. Thou must destroy the 3, 5, and 7 resources of thy foes. Thou must destroy thy foes' root and branch. Then shouldst thou destroy their allies and partisans. The allies and partisans can never exist if the principle be destroyed. If the root of the tree is torn up, the branches and twigs can never exist as before. Carefully concealing thy own means and ends, thou shouldst always watch thy foes, always seeking their flaws. Thou shouldst, O king, rule thy kingdom, always anxiously watching thy foes. By maintaining the perpetual fire by sacrifices, by brown cloths, by matted locks, and by hides of animals for thy bedding, shouldst thou at first gain the confidence of thy foes, and when thou hast gained it thou shouldst then spring upon them like a wolf. For it hath been said that in the acquisition of wealth even the garb of holiness might be employed as a hook staff to bend down a branch in order to pluck the fruits that are ripe. The method followed in the plucking of fruits should be the method in destroying foes, for thou shouldst proceed on the principle of selection. Bear thy foe upon thy shoulders till the time cometh when thou canst throw him down, breaking him into pieces like an earthen pot thrown down with violence upon a stony surface. The foe must never be let off even though he addresseth thee most piteously. No pity shouldst thou show him but slay him at once. By the arts of conciliation or the expenditure of money should the foe be slain. By creating disunion amongst his allies, or by the employment of force, indeed by every means in thy power shouldst thou destroy thy foe. Dhritarashtra said, Tell me truly how a foe can be destroyed by the arts of conciliation or the expenditure of money, or by producing disunion or by the employment of force. Kanaka replied, Listen, O monarch, to the history of a jackal dwelling in days of yore in the forest and fully acquainted with the science of politics. There was a wise jackal, mindful of his own interests, who lived in the company of 4 friends, viz., a tiger, a mouse, a wolf, and a mongoose. One day they saw in the woods a strong deer, the leader of a herd, whom, however, they could not seize for his fleetness and strength. They thereupon called a council for consultation. The jackal, opening the proceedings, said, O tiger, thou hast made many an effort to seize this deer, but all in vain, simply because this deer is young, fleet, and very intelligent. Let now the mouse go and eat into its feed when it lieth asleep. And when this is done, let the tiger approach and seize it. Then shall we all, with great pleasure, feast on it. Hearing these words of the jackal, they all set to work very cautiously as he directed. And the mouse ate into the feet of the deer, and the tiger killed it as anticipated. And beholding the body of the deer lying motionless on the ground, the jackal said unto his companions, Blessed be yet. Go and perform your ablutions. In the meantime I will look after the deer. Hearing what the jackal said, they all went into a stream. And the jackal waited there, deeply meditating upon what he should do. The tiger, endued with great strength, returned first of all to the spot after having performed his ablutions. And he saw the jackal there plunged in meditation. The tiger said, "Why art thou so sorrowful, O wise one? Thou art the foremost of all intelligent beings. Let us enjoy ourselves today by feasting on this carcass." The jackal said, "Hear, O mighty armed one, what the mouse hath said. He hath even said, Oh, fie on the strength of the king of the beasts. This deer hath been slain by me. By might of my arm he will today gratify his hunger. When he hath boasted in such a language, I, for my part, do not wish to touch this food." The tiger replied, "If, indeed, the mouse hath said so, my sense is now awakened. I shall, from this day, slay with the might of my own arms, creatures ranging the forest and then feast on their flesh." Having said this, the tiger went away. And after the tiger had left the spot, the mouse came. And seeing the mouse come, the jackal addressed him and said, "Blessed be thou, O mouse. But listen to what the mongoose hath said. He hath even said, the carcass of this deer is poison, the tiger having touched it with his claws. I will not eat of it. On the other hand, if thou, O jackal, permittest it, I will even slay the mouse and feast on him." Hearing this, the mouse became alarmed and quickly entered his hole. And after the mouse had gone, the wolf, O king, came there having performed his ablutions. And seeing the wolf come, the jackal said unto him, "The king of the beasts hath been angry with thee. Evil is certain to overtake thee. He is expected here with his wife. Do as thou pleasest." Thus was the wolf, also, fond of animal flesh, got rid of by the jackal. And the wolf fled, contracting his body into the smallest dimensions. It was then that the mongoose came. And, O king, the jackal, seeing him come, said, "By the might of my arm have I defeated the others who have already fled. Fight with me first and then eat of this flesh as you please." The mongoose replied, "When, indeed, the tiger, the wolf, and the intelligent mouse have all been defeated by thee, heroes as they are, thou seemest to be a greater hero still. I do not desire to fight with thee." Saying this, the mongoose also went away. Kanaka continued, when they all had thus left the place, the jackal, well pleased with the success of his policy, alone ate up that flesh. If kings always act in this way, they can be happy. Thus should the timid by exciting their fears, the courageous by the arts of conciliation, the covetous by gift of wealth, and equals and inferiors by exhibition of prowess be brought under thy sway. Besides all this, O king, that I have said, listen now to something else that I say. Kanaka continued, if thy son, friend, brother, father, or even a spiritual preceptor, anyone becometh thy foe, thou shouldst, if desirous of prosperity, slay him without scruples. By curses and incantations, by gift of wealth, by poison, or by deception, the foe should be slain. He should never be neglected from disdain. If both the parties be equal and success uncertain, then he that acteth with diligence groweth in prosperity. If the spiritual preceptor himself be vain, ignorant of what should be done and what left undone, and vicious in his ways, even he should be chastised. If thou art angry, show thyself as if thou art not so, speaking even then with a smile on thy lips. Never reprove anyone with indications of anger in thy speech. And O Bharata, speak soft words before thou smitest and even while thou art smiting. After the smiting is over, pity the victim, and grieve for him, and even shed tears. Comforting thy foe by conciliation, by gift of wealth, and smooth behavior, thou must smite him when he walketh not aright. Thou shouldst equally smile the heinous offender who liveth by the practice of virtue. For the garb of virtue simply covereth his offences like black clouds, covering the mountains. Thou shouldst burn the house of that person whom thou punishest with death. And thou shouldst never permit beggars and atheists and thieves to dwell in thy kingdom. By a sudden sally or pitched battle, by poison or by corrupting his allies, by gift of wealth, by any means in thy power, thou shouldst destroy thy foe. Thou mayest act with the greatest cruelty. Thou shouldst make thy teeth sharp to give a fatal bite. And thou should ever smite so effectually that thy foe may not again raise his head. Thou shouldst ever stand in fear of even one from whom there is no fear, not to speak of him from whom there is such. For if the first be ever powerful, he may destroy thee to the root, for thy unpreparedness. Thou shouldst never trust the faithless, nor trust too much those that are faithful, for if those in whom thou confidest prove thy foes, thou art certain to be annihilated. After testing their faithfulness, thou shouldst employ spies in thy own kingdom and in the kingdoms of others. Thy spies in foreign kingdoms should be apt deceivers, and persons in the garb of ascetics. Thy spies should be placed in gardens, places of amusement, temples and other holy places, drinking halls, streets, and with the 18 Tirthas, viz., the minister, the chief priest, the heir presumptive, the commander-in-chief, the gatekeepers of the court, persons in the inner apartments, the jailer, the chief surveyor, the head of the treasury, the general executant of orders, the chief of the town police, the chief architect, the chief justice, the president of the council, the chief of the punitive department, the commander of the fort, the chief of the arsenal, the chief of the frontier guards, and the keeper of the forests, and in places of sacrifice, near wells, on mountains, and in rivers, in forests, and in all places where people congregate. In speech thou shouldst ever be humble, but let thy heart be ever sharp as razor. And when thou art engaged in doing even a very cruel and terrible act, thou shouldst talk with smiles on thy lips. If desirous of prosperity, thou shouldst adopt all arts, humility, oath, conciliation, worshipping the feet of others by lowering thy head, inspiring hope, and the like. And a person conversant with the rules of policy is like a tree decked with flowers but bearing no fruit, or, if bearing fruit, these must be at a great height, not easily attainable from the ground, and if any of these fruits seem to be ripe, care must be taken to make it appear raw. Conducting himself in such a way, he shall never fade. Virtue, wealth, and pleasure have both their evil and good effects closely knit together. While extracting the effects that are good, those that are evil should be avoided. Those that practice virtue incessantly are made unhappy for want of wealth and the neglect of pleasure. Those again in pursuit of wealth are made unhappy for the neglect of two others. And so those who pursue pleasure suffer for their inattention to virtue and wealth. Therefore, thou shouldst pursue virtue, wealth and pleasure, in such a way that thou mayest not have to suffer therefrom. With humiliation and attention, without jealousy and solicitous of accomplishing thy purpose, shouldst thou, in all sincerity, consult with the Brahmanas. When thou art fallen, thou shouldst raise thyself by any means, gentle or violent, and after thou hast thus raised thyself, thou shouldst practice virtue. He that hath never been afflicted with calamity can never have prosperity. This may be seen in the life of one who surviveth his calamities. He that is afflicted with sorrow should be consoled by the recitation of the history of persons of former times, like those of Nala and Rama. He whose heart hath been unstrung by sorrow should be consoled with hopes of future prosperity. He again who is learned and wise should be consoled by pleasing offices presently rendered unto him. He who, having concluded a treaty with an enemy, reposeth at ease as if he hath nothing more to do, is very like a person who awaketh, fallen down from the top of a tree whereon he had slept. A king should ever keep to himself his counsels without fear of calumny. And while beholding everything with the eyes of his spies, he should take care to conceal his own emotions before the spies of his enemies. Like a fisherman who becometh prosperous by catching and killing fish, a king can never grow prosperous without tearing the vitals of his enemy and without doing some violent deeds. The might of thy foe, as represented by his armed force, should ever be completely destroyed, by plowing it up like weeds, and mowing it down and otherwise afflicting it by disease, starvation, and want of drink. A person in want never approach it, from love, one in affluence, and when one's purpose hath been accomplished, one hath no need to approach him whom he had hitherto looked to for its accomplishment. Therefore, when thou doest anything, never do it completely, but ever leave something to be desired for by others, whose services thou mayest need. One who is desirous of prosperity should with diligence seek allies and means, and carefully conduct his wars. His exertions in these respects should always be guided by prudence. A prudent king should ever act in such a way that friends and foes may never know his motive before the commencement of his acts. Let them know all when the act hath been commenced or ended, and as long as danger doth not come, so long only shalt thou act as if thou art afraid. But when it hath overtaken thee, thou must grapple with it courageously. He who trusteth in a foe who hath been brought under subjection by force, summoneth his own death as a crab by her act of conception. Thou shouldst always reckon the future act as already arrived, and concert measures for meeting it, else, from want of calmness caused by haste, thou mayest overlook an important point in meeting it when it is before thee. A person desirous of prosperity should always exert with prudence, adopting his measures to time and place. He should also act with an eye to destiny, as capable of being regulated by mantras and sacrificial rites, and to virtue, wealth, and pleasure. It is well known that time and place, if taken into consideration, always produce the greatest good. If the foe is insignificant, he should not yet be despised, for he may soon grow like a palmyra tree extending its roots, or like a spark of fire in the deep woods that may soon burst into an extensive conflagration. As a little fire gradually fed with faggots soon becometh capable of consuming even the biggest blocks, so the person who increaseth his power by making alliances and friendships soon becometh capable of subjugating even the most formidable foe. The hope thou givest unto thy foe should be long deferred before it is fulfilled, and when the time cometh for its fulfillment, invent some pretext for deferring it still. Let that pretext be shown as founded upon some reason, and let that reason itself be made to appear as founded on some other reason. Kings should, in the matter of destroying their foes, ever resemble razors in every particular, unpitying as these are sharp, hiding their intents as these are concealed. In their leet-hern cases, striking when the opportunity cometh as these are used on proper occasions, sweeping off their foes with all their allies and dependants as these shave the head or the chin without leaving a single hair. O supporter of the dignity of the Kurus, bearing thyself Towards the Pandavas and others also as policy dictateth, act in such a way that thou mayest not have to grieve in future. Well do I know that thou art endued with every blessing, and possessed of every mark of good fortune. Therefore, O king, protect thyself from the sons of Pandu. O king, the sons of Pandu are stronger than their cousins, thy sons. Therefore, O chastiser of foes, I tell thee plainly what thou shouldst do. Listen to it, O king, with thy children, and having listened to it, exert yourselves, to do the needful. O king, act in such a way that there may not be any fear for thee from the Pandavas. Indeed, adopt such measures consonant with the science of policy that thou mayest not have to grieve in the future. Vaisampayana continued, having delivered himself thus Kanaka returned to his abode, while the Kuru king Dhritarashtra became pensive and melancholy.